My name is Mira. For most of my childhood, no one really noticed me. Not in school, not in my neighborhood, sometimes not even in my own home. I wasn't loud. I wasn't talented in the ways people clap for. I didn't win races, recite poems on stage, or raise my hand every 5 minutes in class. I was simply there. Or at least I thought I was. But the truth is, when you're a quiet child in a noisy world, you start to feel like you're fading, like a shadow that follows everyone else but never becomes the center of the light. And for many years, I believed I was invisible, until the day a letter arrived. A single letter, folded twice, written in blue ink with my name on it. And that letter changed everything. But to understand why, I have to take you back to the small lane where I grew up, back to the girl who believed she didn't matter, back to the invisible child. The small house at the end of the lane. I grew up in a narrow lane in Pune. Our house was the last one, painted a fading yellow that looked brighter in old photographs than it did in real life. The paint peeled at the corners, and the metal gate creaked every time someone opened it. Inside, the house was always busy. My father ran a small electrical repair shop. My mother stitched clothes for neighbors. My older brother Arav was the pride of the family, the boy who brought home certificates, medals, and glowing report cards. Every visitor who came into our home said the same thing. Arav is brilliant. He'll become an engineer one day. What a smart boy. I remember sitting quietly in the corner, swinging my legs off the sofa. Sometimes they would look at me and asked politely, "And this is?" "My daughter, Mira," my mother would say. They'd smile. "Oh, nice." Then the conversation would turn back to Arav, and I would return to my favorite activity, listening. The quiet girl in the classroom. School wasn't very different. I studied in a government school with long corridors and classrooms that smelled faintly of chalk and old books. In class, there were two types of students, the loud ones and the important ones. Sometimes they were the same. They raised their hands before the teacher finished asking the question. They laughed loudly. They ran for leadership positions during school activities. Teachers remembered their names. Then there were the rest of us. Children who sat quietly. Children who did their homework. Children who didn't cause trouble. Children like me. I sat in the third row near the window. I loved the window. From there, I could see a tall gulmohar tree in the schoolyard. During summer, its red flowers looked like tiny flames against the green leaves. When the wind blew, the petals would fall like slow, silent rain. I watched them often, sometimes more than I watched the blackboard. Not because I didn't care about school, but because the outside world felt bigger, more magical, more alive. My secret habit. Even though no one noticed me much, I had one secret. I wrote things. Not homework, not essays the teacher assigned, just thoughts, tiny stories, questions, little observations about the world. I wrote in an old notebook my father had brought home from his shop. The first few pages were filled with numbers and electrical diagrams. The rest were mine. I wrote about the gulmohar tree, about the stray dog that slept outside the school gate, about the old woman who sold guavas near the bus stop. I didn't think of it as writing. It was simply the only place where my voice felt real, where I wasn't invisible. The day I disappeared. One day in class, our teacher asked a question. Who can explain why the seasons change? Hands shot up like rockets. Ma'am, I know. The teacher pointed to Arushi, the top student. She answered confidently. The teacher smiled. Very good. Then the teacher looked around. Does anyone want to add something? I knew the answer. I had read about it in the science book the night before. For a moment, my heart beat fast. I slowly raised my hand. Not high, just halfway. The teacher scanned the room. Her eyes moved past me. She called on someone else, then another student, and the lesson continued. My hand slowly dropped. It wasn't the first time, but something about that moment stayed with me because I realized something quietly painful. Even when I tried to be seen, no one looked. Even when I tried to be seen, no one looked. Evenings on the roof. Every evening after homework, I climbed to the roof of our house. The roof had uneven cement and a low boundary wall that felt warm from the day's sun. From there, I could see the entire lane. Children playing cricket, neighbors chatting, vendors shouting, the smell of fried snacks drifting through the air. I liked watching people, not in a lonely way, more like a quiet observer of a big story. Everyone seemed to have a role. The confident boy hitting sixes, the auntie who laughed loudly, the uncle who always told jokes. I wondered sometimes, what was my role? If life were a story, what kind of character was I? The school announcement. One Monday morning, something unusual happened. The principal came into our classroom. Everyone stood up. "Good morning, ma'am." She smiled and said something that changed the rhythm of the room. "Our school will be participating in a national writing competition." The class buzzed instantly. The theme is "A Voice That Changed the World." Students whispered excitedly. The principal continued, "Each class can send only one entry." Immediately, the confident students began discussing ideas. I looked down at my notebook. Writing competition. For people like me, that should have been exciting, but instead I felt the familiar whisper in my mind, "You won't be chosen." Still, something inside me stirred, a tiny spark, because writing was the only place where I felt visible. The teacher said, "Anyone who wants to submit an entry can give it to me by Friday." My heart began to beat faster. Could I? Should I? Would anyone even read it? That evening, I sat on the roof longer than usual. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple, and somewhere between those colors, I made a quiet decision. I would write. Not to win, not to be chosen, just to say something, for once. The night I wrote the story. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I opened my notebook. The fan hummed softly above me. The streetlight outside the window cast a pale glow through the window. I stared at the blank page. "What voice changes the world?" I whispered to myself. I thought about famous people, leaders, scientists, speakers, but something didn't feel right. Then I thought about small voices, quiet voices, the kind people overlook, and suddenly I knew what I wanted to write. I began writing a story about a child no one listened to, a child who quietly helped people without anyone noticing, until one day the world finally realized how important that child had always been. I wrote slowly, carefully, like each word mattered, like each sentence was a tiny piece of courage. By the time I finished, the sky outside was beginning to turn pale blue. Birds chirped. Morning had arrived, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of something I had made. The submission. On Friday, I folded the pages neatly. My hands trembled as I walked to the teacher's desk. Students were chatting loudly around me. I placed the pages gently on her table. "Ma'am, this is my entry." She looked slightly surprised. "Oh, Mira?" She took the papers. "I'll read it later." I nodded and returned to my seat. Part of me expected the familiar feeling of disappearing again, but something strange happened. I didn't feel invisible in that moment, because whether anyone read my story or not, for once I had spoken. The long wait. Days passed, then weeks. The competition almost slipped from everyone's memory. Life returned to normal. Classes, homework, exams, Arav winning another school prize, me watching the Gulmohur petals fall. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A postman stopped at our gate. He called out loudly, "Letter for Mira Sharma." I froze. No one had ever sent me a letter before, not once. My father took the envelope and looked confused. "Mira? Who would write you?" My heart began to race. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with a logo printed on the corner, and in that moment, standing in the doorway of our small yellow house, holding a letter with my name on it, I felt something I had never felt before: curiosity, hope, and a strange, trembling feeling that maybe, just maybe, someone had... My hands trembled so much that the paper made a soft rustling sound. I remember that moment vividly, standing near the doorway of our small house, sunlight falling across the floor, the smell of turmeric and onions coming from the kitchen. My father stood beside me with a curious expression. "Who sent it?" he asked. I don't know," I whispered. My brother Arav leaned over my shoulder. "Maybe it's a mistake," he said casually. But something inside me said it wasn't. My name was written clearly on the envelope. Mira Sharma. Not family of, not to the parents of, just me. For the first time in my life, a letter had come looking specifically for me. I slowly unfolded the paper. The blue ink looked neat and careful, and then I read the first line again. "Dear Mira, your story moved us deeply." For a moment, I didn't understand. My story? Then it hit me. The competition, the writing competition I had almost forgotten. My heart began pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I kept reading. The words that changed everything. The letter said that my story had been selected from hundreds of entries across the region. The judges had read it twice, then 3 times. One of them had even written a note beside it. This child understands something many adults forget. My breath caught in my throat. I had never imagined anyone reading my words that carefully. The letter continued. They were inviting me to attend a small award ceremony in Mumbai. My story had been chosen as one of the top entries in the national category. I blinked, then blinked again. The words felt unreal, like a dream that might disappear if I looked too closely. My father gently took the letter from my hands. He read it slowly, once, then again. Then he looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not confusion, not distraction, but something else. Something warm. Pride. "Mira," he said quietly, "this is big." My brother leaned in again, suddenly much more interested. "Wait, you wrote a story?" I nodded. "When?" "Just one night." He looked genuinely surprised. "You never told anyone?" I didn't know how to explain. I had never expected anyone to care. The first time my name felt important. That evening felt different from any other evening in our house. Usually, dinner conversations were about Arav's school, my father's shop, or my mother's stitching work. But that night, the topic was me. My mother read the letter 3 times. "National competition?" she said, amazed. "You have to go to Mumbai?" I nodded. "The ceremony is next month." My father scratched his chin thoughtfully. "We will go," he said. Just like that. Not maybe, not we'll see. We will go. Something fluttered in my chest. Not excitement exactly, more like disbelief slowly turning into hope. For years, my world had been small and quiet. Now, suddenly, it felt like a door had opened somewhere far away. The teacher's reaction. The next morning, I carried the letter carefully in my school bag. My fingers touched it again and again during class, just to make sure it was real. When school ended, I walked up to my teacher's desk. "Ma'am, I got this." She looked puzzled and opened the letter. As she read it, her eyebrows slowly rose. Then she looked at me. "Mira, this is wonderful." Her voice sounded different, warmer. She called another teacher. "Come see this. Her story got selected." Students nearby started whispering. "Which one? Mira? The quiet girl?" Suddenly, the same classroom where I had always blended into the background felt very different. For the first time, people were looking at me, not past me, at me. And strangely, I didn't feel invisible anymore. Reading my own story again. That evening, my teacher returned my story to me. "I kept a copy," she said, "but this is yours." I walked home slowly, the pages folded neatly in my bag. When I reached my room, I sat on the bed and opened them. I began reading my own story. At first, I felt shy, almost embarrassed. But as I continued, something unexpected happened. I started seeing the story the way a stranger might see it. Not as homework, not as something small, but as something real. The story wasn't just about a child helping people quietly. It was about something deeper. It was about how kindness often hides in quiet places, how the loudest voices aren't always the most meaningful, and how sometimes the world changes because of people no one notices. I suddenly realized something that made my chest tighten. Maybe the judges didn't just see the story. Maybe they saw me. The trip I never expected. The weeks before the ceremony passed quickly. My father borrowed a clean shirt for me from a cousin. My mother stitched a simple sky blue kurta. My teacher helped me prepare a short speech in case I had to say something on stage. A speech? Just thinking about it made my stomach twist. Speaking in front of people? That sounded terrifying. But the teacher smiled gently. "You wrote something beautiful," she said. "Just speak from your heart." The day before the trip, I climbed to the roof again. The evening breeze felt cooler than usual. Children played cricket in the lane as always. The world looked exactly the same, and yet everything felt different. For years, I had watched life from the edges. Now I was about to step somewhere new, somewhere bigger than our small lane, somewhere I had never imagined going. Mumbai. The train ride. We took the early morning train. It was my first long train ride. The station was crowded, noisy, alive with movement. Vendors shouting, announcements echoing, suitcases rolling across the floor. I held my father's hand tightly as we found our seats. When the train began to move, I watched the platform slowly slide away. Buildings blurred, trees rushed past, villages appeared and disappeared like pages flipping in a book. My father pointed at the scenery. "Look, Mira, sugarcane fields." Then later, "See that river?" I nodded, soaking in every moment. Inside me, excitement and nervousness swirled together. What if people expected me to speak perfectly? What if my voice shook? What if they realized I was just me, just the quiet girl from the third row near the window? The City of Lights. When we reached Mumbai in the evening, the city felt enormous. The buildings seemed taller than anything I had seen before. Cars honked constantly, lights glowed everywhere. It felt like the city itself never slept. The organizers had booked a small guest house for the participants. There were other children there too, some confident, some excited, some chatting easily to each other. I stood quietly beside my father. A girl with curly hair smiled at me. "Are you here for the writing award too?" I nodded. "What's your story about?" I hesitated. "About quiet people." She grinned. "That's cool." For the first time, I realized something important. These children weren't famous writers. They were just kids like me, kids who had written something from their hearts, and somehow our words had brought us all to the same place. The night before the ceremony. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The ceiling fan spun slowly above the bed. Outside, distant traffic hummed like a constant wave. I held the letter again and read it one more time. Your story moved us deeply. Those words echoed in my mind. I thought about the Gulmohar tree outside my classroom, about the notebook filled with my quiet thoughts, about the many times I had felt unseen. Then I realized something that made my chest feel warm. Maybe invisibility wasn't permanent. Maybe, sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one opportunity, one person willing to listen, or in my case, one letter. The morning, everything changed. The ceremony hall was bigger than our entire school. Rows of chairs stretched across the room. A stage stood at the front with bright lights. My heart thumped nervously as we found our seats. One by one, winners from different categories were called. Applause filled the room again and again. Then the announcer said something that made my breath stop. Next, we invite Meera Sharma to the stage. For a moment, I didn't move. My father gently nudged me. Go. My legs felt strangely light as I walked toward the stage. The applause was still echoing in the hall when I stepped down from the stage. My hands were slightly cold. In one hand, I held the small glass trophy they had given me. In the other, the certificate with my name printed in bold letters, Meera Sharma. I had never seen my name look so important before. For a moment, everything felt unreal. The bright lights, the applause, the smiling faces. Just a few weeks earlier, I had been sitting quietly near the classroom window watching Gulmohar petals fall. Now, strangers were congratulating me. Beautiful story. You write very thoughtfully. Keep writing. I nodded politely each time, still trying to understand how my small story had traveled so far. My father looked happier than I had ever seen him. He kept telling everyone proudly, "She wrote it herself." Not once, not twice, at least 10 times. And every time he said it, my chest felt warmer. The man with the notebook. As people slowly began leaving the hall, I stood near the stage holding my trophy. That's when I noticed a man walking toward me. He looked older than my father, with gentle eyes and slightly messy gray hair. He held a notebook in his hand. He smiled when he reached me. "Are you Meera?" "Yes," I said softly. "I'm Mr. Arvind Kapoor," he said. He wasn't introduced during the ceremony, but something about him felt important. He opened his notebook. Inside was a printed copy of my story. My story. He had highlighted several sentences with a yellow marker. "You wrote this?" he asked. I nodded. "How old are you?" 13. He looked surprised. Then he smiled again. That explains the honesty. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but then he said something that made my heart skip. "I'm one of the editors at a children's magazine." A magazine? I had never imagined anything like that. I blinked. "A magazine?" "Yes," he said. "We publish stories written by young writers across India." He flipped to a page and pointed to a paragraph from my story. "You wrote something here that stayed with me." He read it aloud. "Sometimes the quietest voices carry the kindest truths." Hearing my own words spoken by someone else felt strange, almost like the sentence belonged to a different person. He closed the notebook gently. "Would you like to write more stories?" The question floated in the air between us. Would I?
My heart already knew the answer. "Yes," I said, but my voice came out barely above a whisper. He smiled again. "That's good." Then he said something that changed the direction of my life. "We would like to publish your story." The word that felt too big. Publish. It sounded like a giant word, a word meant for real writers, not quiet girls with old notebooks. "Are you sure?" I asked. He chuckled softly. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't." My father looked stunned. "Her story? In a magazine?" Mr. Kapoor nodded. "Yes, and if she keeps writing, we'd love to see more." My father looked at me in a way he never had before, not just with pride, but with curiosity, as if he was discovering a part of me he hadn't noticed all these years. Mr. Kapoor handed me a small card. "If you ever write something new," he said, "send it to this address." The card felt light in my hand, but the meaning behind it felt enormous. The train ride home. On the train back to Pune, I couldn't stop looking out the window, but this time my thoughts were different. The world outside looked the same, fields, trees, villages, but my mind felt wider somehow, like someone had opened a door inside me. My father broke the silence after a while. "You never told us you liked writing so much." I thought about that. "I didn't know it mattered," I said honestly. He nodded slowly. Then he said something simple but powerful. "It matters now." The notebook changes. Back home, life returned to its usual rhythm. School, homework, evenings on the roof. But one thing had changed. My notebook. Before, it had been my secret place. Now, it felt like something more. Like a bridge between the quiet world inside my mind and the larger world outside. I started writing more often, not just small thoughts, longer stories. Stories about children like me. Stories about kindness, about courage, about people who feel invisible. And every time I finished a story, I remembered the card Mr. Kapoor had given me. Sometimes I held it and wondered, should I really send something? What if my first story had just been luck? What if the next one wasn't good enough? Those doubts sat quietly in the corner of my mind. But one evening, my teacher said something that helped. "Mira," she told me, "writing isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest." So one night, I chose a story I loved. I folded the pages carefully, placed them in an envelope, and wrote the address from the card. My heart pounded as I dropped it into the red postbox near the bus stop. Then the waiting began again. The second letter. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, the postman came again. This time he didn't shout loudly. He simply handed my father another envelope. My name was written on it again. My father smiled. "Looks like your friend from Mumbai wrote back." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter from Mr. Kapoor, short but powerful. "Dear Mira, your story will appear in next month's issue." I gasped. My mother looked up from her sewing machine. "What happened?" "My story," I whispered. "It's going to be printed." For a moment, no one spoke. Then my brother grinned. "Wait, like a real magazine?" I nodded, and suddenly the invisible girl who used to sit quietly in the corner felt something she had never felt before. Recognition. The day I saw my name in print. A month later, the magazine arrived. The cover was colorful and bright. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. Then I saw it, my story, printed neatly, and right below the title, by Mira Sharma. I stared at the words for a long time. My name, on a printed page, where anyone could read it. My father showed the magazine to neighbors. My teacher brought it to class. Students passed it around curiously. Some even asked me questions. "How did you write it? Can you teach me?" The quiet girl near the window had suddenly become someone people listened to. But the biggest change wasn't outside, it was inside. Because for the first time in my life, I believed something new. Maybe I had never been invisible. Maybe my voice had just been waiting for the right moment, for the right listener, for the right letter. But the real surprise came months later, because one evening another letter arrived. This one wasn't from the competition, and it wasn't from the magazine. It was from someone I had never met, someone who had read my story, someone who said my words had changed something in their life. And when I finished reading that letter, I realized something even more powerful than winning a prize. My story had found someone who needed it. And that was the moment I understood what writing truly meant.
Some memories feel like faded photographs, soft around the edges, warm in color, but carrying a quiet sadness that you only understand years later. My name is Ananya, and for most of my life, I felt like the extra chair at my own family's table. Not unwanted exactly, just unnecessary. Growing up, there were 4 of us in our small house: my mother, my father, my younger brother, Arav, and me. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. My father was respected in our neighborhood, my mother was known for her kindness, Arav was charming, loud, and full of life. And me? I was the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, the one people forgot to ask about. I noticed the difference very early. When Arav was born, I was 6 years old enough to remember how things used to be. Before him, my mother used to brush my hair every morning before school. She would hum soft songs while tying my braids, and sometimes she would kiss the top of my head. "Ananya," she would say, "you are my sunshine." But after Arav arrived, everything changed slowly, like winter creeping into autumn. The songs stopped, the braids became quick and messy, and eventually, even the morning kisses disappeared. Arav became the center of the house. If he laughed, everyone laughed. If he cried, the entire world stopped. If he wanted something, he got it. New toys, better clothes, the bigger bedroom when we moved houses. Meanwhile, I learned something children should never have to learn: how to make myself smaller. I stopped asking for things, stopped complaining, stopped expecting love to come my way. I remember one particular afternoon when I was 9. My school had organized a small art competition. I had spent weeks painting a picture of a sunrise over a lake. The colors were bright and hopeful, and my teacher loved it so much she entered it into the district competition. When the results came, I had won second place in the entire district. I ran home that day, holding the certificate tightly so the wind wouldn't wrinkle it. My heart was pounding with excitement. For once, I thought, maybe today they'll notice me. When I reached home, my mother was sitting in the living room with Arav. He was crying. "What happened?" I asked softly. "Arav didn't make the cricket team," my mother said, her voice full of sympathy. I stood there quietly, my certificate trembling in my hands. "Oh," I said. No one asked about my day. No one noticed the certificate. After a few minutes, my mother looked at me. "Ananya, can you make tea for your brother? He's upset." I remember standing in the kitchen later, staring at the kettle as tears blurred my vision. My certificate stayed folded inside my bag for days. Eventually, I slipped it under my mattress. It wasn't that my parents were cruel. They never yelled at me without reason. They paid for my school, they fed me, clothed me, and made sure I had what I needed. But love, the kind that feels warm and visible, that always seemed reserved for Arav. As we grew older, the gap widened. When Arav turned 16, my parents threw him a huge birthday party. Lights, music, cake, dozens of relatives. When I turned 16 2 years earlier, my birthday had been a quiet dinner at home. My mother had forgotten to buy a cake until the evening. "Next year we'll celebrate properly," she had promised. Next year never came. But despite everything, I loved my brother. Arav wasn't responsible for the favoritism. He had simply grown up in a world where he was adored. Sometimes he would sit in my room late at night and tell me about his dreams, becoming a professional athlete, traveling the world, buying a big house for our parents. And I would smile, because his happiness felt like sunlight in our quiet home. Still, deep inside, there was always a question I never dared to ask. Why? Why did my parents look at him with pride, but at me with something distant, something careful, something that felt almost like guilt? The truth began to unravel the year I turned 24. It started with something small, something ordinary, something that seemed completely unrelated to me. A hospital visit, a routine medical test, and a doctor who frowned at a piece of paper. That was the day everything changed. That was the day the first crack appeared in the story of my family, and none of us were ready for what would come next.
For the next few days, our house felt different, quieter than usual. Not the comfortable quiet I had grown used to over the years, but the kind that sits heavily in the air, like everyone is thinking the same thoughts, but no one knows how to say them out loud. My parents spoke in hushed voices late at night. Arav stayed in his room more than usual. And me? I spent hours staring at the ceiling, wondering about a woman I had never met, Mira, my biological mother. Somewhere out there, she had lived 24 years believing her baby had died the day she was born. The thought made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. 3 days after the hospital meeting, the doctor called. "We found something," he said. My heart started racing immediately. What? The hospital still has old records from that year. I could hear papers shuffling on his desk. There was only one woman named Mira admitted that night. Her full name was Mira Khanna. I repeated it quietly. Mira Khanna. The name suddenly felt incredibly important. "Do you have an address?" I asked. "Yes," the doctor replied, "but it's an old one." My hands trembled. That's okay, because even an old address was more than I had ever had before. The next morning, my father and I drove across the city. The car ride was almost silent. I watched buildings pass outside the window, my mind full of questions. What would she look like? Would she recognize me? Would she be angry? Or worse, would she feel nothing at all? My father finally spoke. "You don't have to do this today." I shook my head. "No, I do." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I've spent my whole life wondering why I felt different. Now I finally know there's someone out there connected to me. He nodded slowly. "You're brave, Ananya." I gave a small smile. For most of my childhood, I had never heard that word used for me. The address led us to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. Small houses lined the street, surrounded by trees and flowering plants. It felt peaceful, hopeful. My heart began pounding harder as we stopped in front of a pale blue house with a small garden in the front yard. Wind chimes hung from the porch. They made a soft, musical sound in the breeze. I stared at the house. "She lives here?" I asked. My father checked the paper again. "Yes." My legs suddenly felt weak. This is really happening. We walked slowly up the path. Every step felt heavier than the last. My father raised his hand and knocked. 3 soft knocks echoed against the wooden door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then we heard footsteps inside. The door opened, and there she was. The woman standing in the doorway looked to be in her late 40s. Her hair was streaked with silver, tied loosely behind her head. Her eyes were warm but curious. But the moment I saw her face, my breath caught, because looking at her felt like looking into a mirror from the future. The same eyes, the same shape of the nose, the same quiet expression. For the first time in my life, I saw someone who looked like me. She studied us politely. "Yes?" My father hesitated. "Are you Mira Khanna?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." My throat suddenly felt dry. I stepped forward. My name is Ananya. She smiled kindly. That's a beautiful name. Her voice was gentle, and something about it felt strangely familiar. My father cleared his throat. May we speak with you for a moment? She looked slightly puzzled, but stepped aside. Of course. We entered the house. It smelled faintly of jasmine tea. The living room was simple but cozy. Bookshelves, soft lighting, framed photographs on the walls. My eyes drifted toward one photo frame on a nearby table. It showed a younger version of her holding a tiny baby blanket. The blanket was pink, but there was no